Hello friends, welcome to Take Better Photos channel. We're here with another video, and this time we're going to be reviewing Luminar AI. Luminar is one of those photo editors I've been a fan of. It actually made it to #1 on my list of top photo raw editors for 2020 because of the great value it provides as well as its editing performance. So I was really excited to try out their upgrade to see what they have improved. Luminar was probably the first photo editor made use of AI. So as you can see here, they call themselves the AI-powered photo editor. That has been the case since the first version of Luminar. But now there's a lot more competition. Both On1 and Pixelmator Pro and many others are all saying that they have AI-enabled tools. So it is now a crowded field. It's a question whether Luminar can step up its game and fend off the competitors. So Luminar AI was launched on December 2020. I've heard a lot of people saying online that this was not an upgrade to Luminar 4, but after using the software, it really has a similar feature set. I'm actually going to be comparing this based on my experience with Luminar 4. Luminar AI, just like its predecessor Luminar 4, comes at a great price. As you can see here, it's $66. It is on sale now, but anything less than $100 for me in photo editing is a great deal, assuming that it does what it's advertised. But is it worth $66? We're going to find out. So we're going to be talking about the top 5 standout features of Luminar AI to help you make a decision whether this is the photo editor you want to spend not just your money on, but your time learning. All right, so let's get right into it. Let's look at the first standout feature, which is its improved performance. So one thing I will say about Luminar AI as compared to Luminar 4 is the performance has really improved. So last time, navigating the software was very laggy, but Luminar AI seems to have improved that quite a bit, even on older machines. So that in itself, it's a very big upgrade already. As usual, Luminar AI has a very well-designed interface. I did mention that about Luminar 4 as well. Very simple, very elegant looking, doesn't have a lot of clutter. You can see here, you can navigate very easily the all photos, the edits, the recently added, and so forth and so on. You could also set something as a favorite by just clicking this heart button. It doesn't have, as far as I can see, support for star rating or color rating or other filtering options here, except for the ones you see here on the side. But I guess for most people, for beginners especially, this will be adequate. The most important thing is the fast photo browsing experience. You simply add a folder here. You don't have to create a catalog. So for many people just want simplicity, right? They just want to browse the folder in many cases and just be able to navigate through the folder and then view the files or make edits to the files. So the second standout feature is its support for raw editing. So if I click edit for this, you can see that it has a very nice panel here with all the essential tools. So what makes it stand out are its adjustments. So as you can see for this image, it's very clear which portions is in the shadow and in the highlights. So a good raw editor would be able to figure out which are the tones that need to be targeted. So for shadow adjustments, you want this rock formation to be targeted. And you can see for Luminar AI, it is pretty smart in just targeting the shadows. It doesn't affect the sky area. Now it is affecting a little bit of the water here, but that's still acceptable. For the highlights as well, you can see that it has a very nice, does adjust the highlights, very targeted as well. The resulting image is pretty good. It has nice contrast and it really brought out the details in each of the scenes, and it has a very pleasing look to it. It has also a blacks panel here if you want to make adjustments further. This is very useful for extremely bad exposure, something in really dark shadow. Of course, for raw adjustment support, you have not just this panel here, but you have all the tools which will work with this raw image. The second standout feature are its enhancement tools. I would say this is something unique to Luminar itself, to Luminar AI, wherein you're able to make an image pop or enhance the tones and the color in one slide, make the image really more dynamic. So for example, in this very bland image, simply by going into the enhancement AI panel here, you see it has the 2 tools here, which are really useful. So the accent tool will analyze the scene and try to improve the colors and contrast based on some AI model, right? So you can see that it does a really great job with one slide. That is really a standout feature, I think, because you don't really see this type of capability in other editors. right? Same thing with the sky enhancer. You don't have to create any mask or anything like that. It will just target the sky. So it doesn't just figure out which is the sky, it also does the adjustment. So it's just a time saver, right, for this case. So enhancement that is not limited to just this enhancement panel. There's also a structure panel here which will enhance the midtones, as you can see, like a clarity adjustment. So it does a great job of that as well. So that will also help enhance an image. Let's look at another image here. It looked better in real life, but the picture looks a little bit flat. But let's improve that again with the enhance feature. You can see how nicely it does it, right? And you can, of course, go overboard with this, but overall, I think it has a very pleasing look. Then you can use the sky enhancer as well to enhance the sky, and so forth and so on, and structure as well. So these three tools, structure, accent, and sky enhancer, are my favorites for enhancing any image. At number 3 are its AI tools. And when you talk about AI tools, Luminar AI, just like Luminar before it, has a lot of them, but Luminar AI has added even more tools, even more AI tools, which is of course a big plus. What are the most popular ones which we can talk about here? So the first one would be the Sky AI. Of course, this is where Luminar became famous, the idea to replace a sky. So let's just do that. So it works in the same way as Luminar 4. So if you've used Luminar 4, you know what this is. So you can just click on sky selection here, and then you can just choose whatever sky you want to replace, and Luminar will take care of all the blending and the masking and all of that. What you can do here in this sky is you can actually adjust the orientation, right? So you can move it up or down. You can change the horizontal orientation as well. Personally, I prefer going to the sunset clouds. I always like sunsets. These are the ones which really make an image wonderful. It's actually quite complicated to do, to blend this very nicely if you had to do this manually. So that is sky replacement. Another very interesting thing, and this is new for Luminar AI, this was not available in Luminar 4, is this tool called Portrait Bokeh. I thought this was a wonderful thing. This is really a standout. I don't really see any other photo editors have this Portrait Bokeh. So what happens here is it will use AI to detect the depth of the scene. So there'll be some sort of depth mapping here to turn this 2D image into a 3D depth map. And so it will be able to figure out which parts need to be out of focus, right? To mimic a fast lens, right? So if I just drag it all the way till the end, you'll see the very nice effects, see, very natural looking. So among apps, I would say Luminar AI has the best, allowing you to create bokeh. Other apps, if you do these things manually, it might not look as natural as it could be. And a nice thing about this is you can edit, right? If you really are not satisfied with this, you can still even edit what is in focus, or if Luminar AI made a mistake in some way, you could still edit the focus. Now, aside from being able to edit what's in focus, so for example, I defocus this, right? You can see that I can just defocus by just brushing on that. I would say that the most useful thing about the controls for Portrait Bokeh would be this portion here called background. So for background, you can actually adjust the depth. So if you decrease the depth, it's like making your lens wide open. So you're like increasing the aperture to make the scene more out of focus, right? So there. So in this case, it looked pretty good, or you can of course reduce it if you wish. Just a very nice effect. All right, so the next standout feature would be local adjustments. So local adjustments, I'm going to be showing you 2 ways why these local adjustments are a standout feature. So let's say we want to just adjust a targeted area here, which is this rock formation. So we can click on this local masking button here, and then just click add, and then choose basic. So it's a pretty simple interface. You have basically for paint and erase. So you can just paint on those areas you want to target. So let's say I want to increase the exposure or improve this rock formation. Now you can see it does not support edge detection. We're still not going to worry about the edges too much here. So we're going to rely on the smartness of its tools. The local adjustment panel supports the essential tools, but it doesn't support all tools. So if you go to the global adjustments panel, of course you have access to all the other tools. But when you're doing local adjustments, you have only support for these essential tools. These essential tools are quite adequate, you know, to do good editing, because it not only does it have the tonal adjustments, you also have a structure adjustment here, as we're going to demonstrate. So first, let's use the shadow adjustment here. You see the advantage now of having a targeted, smartly targeted shadow adjustment. Even though my mask was not perfect, as you can see, if I brush on this, you see it's not perfect. It does not hit the non-shadow areas. It sort of helps me, even though my masking is not perfect. And it's very nice that this local mask or this local adjustment also supports structure. So you can see that it does work for the structure panel there. So I want to put all the detail back into the rocks. So that is why I'm using this structure panel. If I want to change the sky, it's the same thing. So I can just click on the layer, this header here, and then you can see the layers. If I want to add another layer, click add, click basic, and then it just, again, brush on this whole thing right here. Again, I won't be so perfect. This usually is a bad thing, but again, because of the smartness of Luminar's adjustments, we can get away with it. So if I want to just adjust the highlights, it still does that in a decent way. All right, now local masks are not just limited to local adjustments. You can also do image blending with local masks in Luminar AI. So this is an unusual feature, because normally raw editors or photo editors like this, like Lightroom replacements, don't really support compositing. But Luminar AI, in a limited way, does support it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to blend this with an image of a lower exposure, because the windows of this are overexposed and the color is gone from the lights here, which I could see when I was at that scene. So I want to bring back what I saw at that scene, and luckily I took multiple exposures for this shot. Okay, so how do you do that? You just click on the add button here, but instead of basic, you're going to add texture, and then we're going to add a texture here. Okay, now then you have to basically choose the image that you have. All right, now I already have the image here. Once you choose it, okay, once you choose it, you'll see it'll appear in this all textures. Now I already have the image right here, so I'm just going to select that. So as you can see, this thing is already blended. So this texture here is just like a layer, right? This is like a layer on top of our existing image. So if I put this to 0, you will see that our existing image is going to be fully shown. But if I put this opacity to 1, then my texture is shown. See? So it's at 50%, you can sort of do a limited blending, right? Where you have both, you can see parts of both. Now to make the results a little bit better, you probably want to do some masking, right? So what I'm going to do here is just put this thing to 1 and then just do a mask to bring out the bottom layer, which is our existing image. So I'm just going to just use the erase tool here. I'm just going to set the opacity to a little bit lower here, right? And then I'm just going to have a very big brush here to make it very natural and smooth. And as you can see, the whole thing is selected at the start. So we're going to remove that selection here so that you're going to erase this to sort of hide this portion of the layer. Okay, so we're just going to do that. So you can see now slowly but surely it is like bringing back the detail. So as you can see now, we are combining the best of both worlds in this operation here. So obviously this will be a little bit more work, but you can see the results are worth it, because you can see the very beautiful lights, and you can also see the bustling scene in this street. Okay, it is limited in the sense where these layers, you cannot merge these layers and do operations similar to those found in compositing editors like Pixelmator Pro, but you can see that it does a pretty good job even in Luminar AI. All right, so those were the top 5 standout features. But are there any limitations of Luminar AI? Are there any limitations? Well, no photo editor is perfect, so let me just talk about some limitations I found with Luminar AI. So you are aware, as you do your editing, you know what it can and cannot do. Okay, so the first limitation of Luminar AI would be that its layers or its local adjustments do not support RAW. So let me explain what I mean by that. So if I edit this photo, though this is obviously a RAW file, this is a Nikon shot, from a Nikon camera, it's an NEF file. So if I click edit here, so let me show you the global adjustments. All right. So this is the global adjustments panel. When we click this, the top button here, then we go into light. So let me edit this. So you have here shadows. Let me just adjust this. Typically the shadows and then the highlights. All right. So that is the adjustment for the global panel here, this main panel. So that's the edit for the global panel. Now let's go into the local panel. So I'm just going to reset this. Okay, so now I'm in the local panel. See, it's local masking. So I've clicked on the local masking button here to get to this interface. So as usual, I'm going to click add and click basic. Right, so here I'm going to do the same thing. So first of all, this local masking does, as I say, have a limited set of tools. It's not the same set of tools as the main panel, but let's do the same adjustment. It does have a highlight and shadows. So let's drag the shadows as before, right? And just drag the highlights as before. So looking at this is not the same adjustment as the main panel. And why is that so? It is because, as you can see, when it is in local adjustment, when you're doing local adjustments, the image now is treated as a JPEG. It's definitely not treated as a RAW. You don't have the same dynamic range as if you're treating this as a RAW file. So RAW is not supported in local adjustment. So that is a limitation, just be aware of. It is not an unusual limitation because most photo editors really don't support RAW in their local adjustments. Usually the higher end photo editors will support RAW for their layers. So this is the RAW edit, and this is the local adjustment edit. RAW edit, local adjustment edit. Big difference, don't you say? This won't really matter if the image doesn't have severe exposure problems, but if you're shooting in low light or in very harsh conditions, it would be nicer if RAW was supported in the local adjustments as well. Okay, another disadvantage of Luminar AI would be the editing itself compared to some higher end photo editors. All right, so if you make adjustments to shadow here, you can see sometimes when you do these adjustments, the colors might be a little bit oversaturated, meaning it's not as natural looking as some others. So that I would find this in their shadow adjustment and their highlight adjustment sometimes has a tendency to make colors extremely wild, which become unnatural. So that's one thing to remember. You have to be a bit conservative and don't overdo the adjustments, or the images will become unnatural. Same thing with the structure adjustment here. If you actually do a structure adjustment, and sometimes they'll introduce halos as well to this. Right, you see the halos around this if you overuse some of these adjustments. So that's one disadvantage I would say of Luminar AI. So the third problem I would say is the performance. The performance itself is much faster than Luminar 4, but my MacBook is still blowing. It's still working extremely heavily when doing all of this editing. You probably do not hear this, but the fan is blowing like crazy. And this is much more so than on other photo editors. It does make a lot more use of the processor, and it drains the battery a lot faster. What I'm trying to say really is that Luminar AI is a resource hog. Well, that's all I have for Luminar AI. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this content to help keep the videos coming. And till the next video, I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye for now.